"You're fired," she said, calmly, without a trace of anger. The room went dead silent. The CEO blinked, laughed, until she slid the papers across the table. That's when the smirk dropped from his face, and everyone else realized. The janitor was the boss all along. But to understand how we got here, let's go back 10 years. Back to when she was invisible. Day 1, floor 1. Uniform crisp, mop in hand. Her name tag said Lena. No one asked her name, though. They just called her janitor. She clocked in before the lights came on and left long after they flickered off. No one looked her in the eye. No one said thank you. She didn't expect them to. The building was a mirror of corporate ambition. Glass walls, fast heels, sharp ties. But Lena, she was just background noise. They stepped around her like furniture. She moved silently, cleaning up after the chaos they left behind. Spilled coffee, crumpled paper, broken pens, broken people. In the break room, she heard everything. Gossip, greed, glorified mediocrity. Executives bragged about bonuses while the assistants cried in silence. Promotions went to the loudest voices, not the hardest workers. Lena said nothing, just scrubbed harder. But if anyone had looked closer, really looked, they'd have noticed something strange. She didn't miss a word in meetings she wasn't invited to. She nodded when junior analysts whispered insights they'd never share in a boardroom. She paused outside the CEO's office longer than she needed to. Every now and then, she asked the kind of question a janitor wouldn't ask. "Why do you think turnover's so high this quarter? Did you notice the supply chain delay before it hit? Is it normal for the CFO's reports to always miss Thursday deadlines?" They thought she was joking or nosy or maybe just weird. They didn't know she'd graduated top of her class. They didn't know she once ran a startup. They didn't know she walked away from it all, and for a reason. Every night after her shift, she'd walk past the glowing offices, and under that cheap uniform was a notebook filled with diagrams, strategies, ideas. She wasn't cleaning for a paycheck. She was observing, watching, calculating. What she saw wasn't a company. It was a storm waiting to collapse. She knew the names of everyone who worked there, even the interns. She knew who stayed late without credit, who made others look good, who cared, and more importantly, who didn't. Still, for 10 years, she said nothing, played the part, even when executives ignored her hello. Even when the CEO once spilled coffee and walked away, expecting her to wipe it up. She did, because Lena understood something they didn't. True power doesn't need to shout. It listens, learns, waits. And while they built empires out of ego, Lena was building something else, quietly, patiently, from the shadows until the day came, when silence ended. By year 2, Lena knew everyone's rhythm. She knew Carla in accounting always cried in the stairwell after performance reviews. She knew Malik from tech support brought extra sandwiches to share with the receptionist who couldn't afford lunch. She knew the marketing VP called his wife every day before pretending to be in a meeting. He was cheating. She never judged. She just watched. Because Lena wasn't just cleaning the floors, she was cleaning the filth they pretended didn't exist. She memorized the systems, the hierarchy, who got away with what. She noticed how people spoke differently when certain titles entered the room, how jokes shifted, how postures stiffened, fear disguised as professionalism. She saw who smiled at interns and who snapped their fingers at them. She made mental notes, not out of spite, but out of clarity. One day she knew those notes would matter. Behind her calm eyes was a mind racing at 100 miles per hour. In the quiet of her studio apartment, bare, neat, and bathed in blue light from her laptop, she transformed. Gone were the gloves and mop. In their place, spreadsheets, legal contracts, shareholder agreements, asset reports. She tracked the company like an analyst, watched its financials more closely than the CFO, because part of her still loved the business world. It just needed people who weren't broken by greed. Late nights, she'd read, study, strategize, business journals, economic case studies, books by people who built empires from scratch. She wrote notes in margins, cross-referenced real-time data, not because she had to. Because she was preparing, people assumed janitors couldn't spell leverage. Lena had been quietly using it for years. She owned 27% of the company. How? 10 years ago, the company had been struggling. Stocks had dipped, panic spread. A small group of investors quietly bailed. One of them owed Lena a favor, an old friend from her startup days. She acquired those shares silently, through proxies, trusts, and layers no casual observer would trace. No one in the office knew. The rest she purchased slowly, strategically, as the years passed and her dividends multiplied. She was patient, invisible. She wasn't after quick control. She wanted to understand who truly deserved to lead. Her shareholding gave her access to confidential reports, audits, memos not meant for her eyes. And yet, every detail reinforced her belief. Leadership was failing from the top. The CEO was burning bridges, padding numbers, and making short-term moves for long-term disaster. Meanwhile, those on the ground floor, they were brilliant, overworked, unseen like she was, but she noticed them, every single one. Sometimes she'd help quietly. She once corrected a pricing error that saved a product launch by leaving a sticky note on the junior analyst's desk. Another time, she fixed a security loophole after overhearing a server admin vent, never took credit, always walked away before they could see her. They called it luck. She called it alignment. She also started visiting the company's subsidiaries, pretended to be a cleaner there too, observed culture at every level, met people with passion, ideas, and no voice. She took note of every potential leader the CEO never noticed. But with every silent act, her respect for the workers grew, and her tolerance for the leadership shrank. There was one moment that sealed it. The CEO walked past a temp struggling to carry a box of files, didn't stop, didn't help, just barked, "Be careful, those are important." Lena took the box from the temp and carried it herself. Twice as fast, twice as careful. The temp looked confused. "Thank you, are you new?" Lena just smiled. Because even in that small exchange, she saw what the CEO couldn't. The real weight in a company isn't carried by titles. It's carried by people no one notices. That night, she wrote one sentence in her journal. Soon. Lena didn't move fast. She moved deliberately, and by year 7, she had seen enough. The CEO, Martin Shaw, was everything wrong with modern leadership. Smooth on the surface, rotting underneath. He shook hands for the camera, but tightened his grip when no one was looking. Charisma masked control. Vision masked ego. In meetings, he spoke in circles, buzzwords, and projections. Promises that sounded good but delivered nothing. Employees left faster than they were hired. Innovation slowed. Morale dropped. Profits dipped, but only in places no one important tracked. Shaw always found someone else to blame. Sometimes it was the market, sometimes middle management. Once he blamed an intern for leaking a client brief. She cried in the bathroom for days. Lena found her, sat with her, told her to hold on. Shaw didn't just ruin productivity, he drained hope. Lena began documenting everything, carefully, anonymously. She had a burner laptop, a spreadsheet tracking every executive misstep, meetings recorded from air vents, emails forwarded to encrypted accounts. She wasn't just watching now, she was collecting proof. She noticed something else too. Shaw was stealing, not in the obvious way, no wire transfers or hidden safes, but he was funneling money into vanity projects, misclassifying expenses, and redirecting bonuses to loyalists, quiet corruption, just enough to stay under the radar, but not under hers. One day, she saw him fire a brilliant software engineer over attitude. The real reason? The engineer had flagged a security flaw in a program Shaw had approved. Rather than admit the flaw, Shaw buried the evidence and the employee. Lena wrote that name down. The engineer would return in this story. After that, she couldn't stay passive, not anymore. She began reaching out carefully to people she trusted, not as Lena the janitor, but as a silent partner. Anonymous emails, encrypted messages, encouraging whistleblowers to speak, offering legal guidance, sometimes even money for legal fees. People started coming forward. HR reports surfaced. Ignored complaints, hidden settlements, wrongful terminations. Employees who had suffered in silence began connecting the dots. They didn't know who was behind it, but someone was watching, someone was fighting for them. Lena started buying just a little more stock every quarter, just enough to strengthen her position. She knew the exact threshold she needed to force a board vote. She also knew the board members personally by now, watched them from a distance, studied their weaknesses and loyalties. And she was almost there, but Shaw wasn't stupid. He sensed something shifting. He started asking questions, held surprise meetings, fired 2 assistants within a week, installed cameras in break rooms, told security to keep an eye on certain employees. Lena knew time was running out, so she accelerated the plan. She leaked a financial report to a journalist, one that exposed how Shaw had inflated earnings projections using non-existent client contracts. It hit the news cycle like a hammer. Stockholders panicked. The board demanded answers. Shaw deflected, blamed rogue accountants, called it a miscommunication. But that night, Lena sent every board member a letter. Each letter included documents, timelines, names, a personal note, just one sentence. "You have a duty to your people. Read this before the meeting tomorrow." It worked. The board called for an emergency vote. Shaw still thought he was untouchable. He walked into the room with his signature arrogance, straightened his tie, made a joke about cleaning house. He didn't realize the person who actually could clean house was already sitting at the head of the table. And she wasn't wearing a janitor uniform anymore. The room was full, board members seated, legal counsel present, HR silent, reporters waiting just outside the glass walls, sensing something seismic about to happen. But it wasn't the tension that made the air feel electric. It was the woman sitting at the head of the table. No one had seen her enter, no announcement, no introduction. She sat quietly, posture straight, eyes calm. Lena, no mop, no gloves, no uniform, just a sharp black suit, simple pearl earrings, and a folder resting in front of her like a loaded weapon. Martin Shaw, still technically CEO, stood by the door, blinking like he'd walked into the wrong universe. "This is a shareholders' meeting," he snapped, trying to reassert control. "Yes," Lena replied, evenly. "And as the controlling shareholder, I called it." Whispers rippled across the table. A few eyes widened, others narrowed. One board member, the only one who had ever held a door open for Lena, looked stunned. Another started scrolling through their phone, already trying to confirm the numbers. Lena opened the folder. Inside, proof. Years of financial irregularities, evidence of retaliation, unethical behavior, false reporting, signed contracts, correspondence, testimonies, confidential files, only someone with deep access and deeper patience could have collected. Shaw tried to interrupt. "This is absurd. You're a janitor. You don't know what you're talking about." "I do," she said, cutting him off, not loudly, but with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. "And I've known for 10 years. She told the room everything, how she acquired her shares, why she chose not to reveal them, what she saw, what she heard, the people who were hurt, the decisions made to protect profits instead of people, and how she waited, not out of fear but out of respect, for the chance to understand what kind of leader the company really needed. Leadership isn't about power," she said. "It's about responsibility." She named names, showed data, paused when emotions ran high, gave credit to those who had quietly resisted. One board member started tearing up when she showed how a decision they signed off on had cost dozens of employees their health insurance. No one spoke when she finished, not even Shaw. Then Lena turned directly to the board. "You have a choice," she said. Continue protecting a man who has failed this company, or begin rebuilding with people who care more about the mission than their title. A vote was held. It wasn't close. Shaw was removed as CEO. Security was called. He didn't go quietly, muttering lawsuits, threats, disbelief, but he did go. And as he passed Lena, he didn't look her in the eye. Couldn't, because in that moment he knew. He hadn't been outmaneuvered, he'd been outclassed. The board stood, unsure what happened next. Some nodded in gratitude, others in shame. A few lingered, asking Lena for next steps. She didn't have a script. She had a vision. "We don't start by hiring new executives," she said. "We start by listening to the people who've been carrying this place while the rest of you looked the other way." And then she walked out, not because she didn't belong there, but because she finally did. As she passed the janitor closet, now empty, she paused. Inside were old mops, rags, a battered notebook. She picked it up, flipped to the last page, and wrote one word: justice. The boardroom was still echoing from Shaw's exit when word began to spread. Whispers swirled through hallways like wildfire. "The janitor is the owner. She's the new boss. She's been here the whole time?" But Lena didn't speak to the rumors. She spoke with actions. By noon, every department had received the same memo, signed not by management, but by Lena herself, short, clear, powerful. "We begin with listening. I'll be walking through every department personally. Prepare nothing, just be honest." And she meant it. That day, Lena walked every floor, not as a CEO in a power suit, but in simple clothes, clipboard in hand. She sat with designers, coders, warehouse packers, and janitors. She asked questions no one had asked them before. "What's broken? What would you fix if you had the power? Who deserves credit around here that never gets it?" People were hesitant at first, but she listened. Not just politely, fully. She nodded, took notes, asked follow-ups. Some employees got emotional. Others laughed nervously, unsure if it was all a trick. It wasn't. Lena was building a new map of the company, one based not on departments and hierarchies, but on people and truth. And then came the meeting. All staff, mandatory, no agenda. The auditorium buzzed with tension. The same rows that had seen dull quarterly updates and hollow motivational speeches were now filled with wide eyes and fast heartbeats. Some employees stood in the back, curious. Others sat front row, arms crossed, skeptical. When Lena walked onto the stage, the room fell silent. She didn't use a podium. She didn't use slides. She didn't need to. "I'm not here to sell you a dream," she began. "I'm here to wake us all up." She told them everything. How she had bought into the company when no one else believed in it. How she had spent the last decade working as a janitor, not to hide, but to see. To understand who this company really was beneath all the branding and bravado. The room was frozen. Some jaws dropped. Others held back tears. "I saw who really makes this company work," she continued. "It's not just the people with titles. It's the ones who clean up after late nights, who fix code no one understands, who answer phones with kindness when clients yell." She looked around the room, not at the executives in suits, but at the interns, the admin staff, the maintenance crew standing near the exit. "You kept this place alive, and now you're going to help lead it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Not disbelief. Hope. She announced the creation of a new leadership council, made up of employees from every level. Janitors, analysts, receptionists, engineers, their job. To report directly to her. To keep her accountable. "And yes," she said, smiling, "there will still be structure, but not the kind that silences, the kind that supports." A standing ovation didn't happen immediately, but it came, slowly, like a wave. One person stood, then another, then the room. Even the former critics rose because in that moment they weren't applauding a speech. They were applauding truth. And Lena? She didn't cry. She didn't bow. She just nodded, stepped back, and let them feel what it was like to finally be seen. The board had voted. The company had listened. But Lena wasn't finished, because there was one final piece left to set right, not just for the sake of power, but for the sake of principle. Martin Shaw had been officially removed from his role, but now Lena would remove him from the company. Permanently, she called for one last meeting, smaller than the others but far more important, not in a boardroom but in the open concept commons area where employees walked freely, where nothing could be hidden behind oak doors and legal teams. No shields, no secrets. Shaw arrived late, dressed in designer confidence, backed by two attorneys, still wearing that smug smile that had survived longer than it should have. Lena stood alone at the center. Around them were employees from every level. Engineers paused their code, customer service reps muted their headsets, janitors leaned against their carts, executives stood in awkward silence. Even the cafeteria team stopped serving. Everyone was watching. Lena held no papers, just presence. "Martin," she began, her voice steady, "you've already been removed as CEO today. I'm terminating your relationship with the company. Fully and finally," Shaw scoffed. "On what grounds?" She turned to the crowd, not to him. "Let's talk about the grounds." She listed the lies. How he fabricated contracts to inflate earnings. The retaliation, firing employees who questioned his decisions, the manipulation, using company funds for personal indulgences while freezing raises, and the silence, allowing a culture of fear to spread through every hallway just so he could keep control. Each item hit like a hammer, and each time Lena didn't just accuse, she named the victims, brought their stories forward, repeated their words, gave voice to people who had once been too afraid to speak. An engineer in the back whispered, "That was me." A receptionist covered her mouth. A junior accountant looked down, her hands trembling. Shaw's smirk faded. His lawyers whispered. His ego shrank. "This isn't personal," Lena said. "This is structural. This is systemic. And this is over." He tried to speak. Some last-minute denial, some threat. But Lena raised a hand. He froze. Something in her stillness made the room quieter than any shout ever could. "You had every chance to change," she said. "I watched, I waited, I even gave you quiet warnings. You ignored them all, so now I won't whisper anymore." She turned to security, not with drama, just finality. "Escort Mr. Shaw from the premises. His access is revoked, effective immediately." Gasps filled the room, not because of the act, but because of the clarity. Shaw didn't argue, couldn't, because every person in that room knew. It was justified. As he was led away, he looked around for one final connection, one last show of loyalty. There was none. No one met his eyes, except Lena. She gave him a single nod, not of respect, but of recognition, not of him, but of what this moment meant for the company, for every ignored worker, for herself. She had carried a mop for a decade. Now she carried the weight of justice without breaking her voice. When he was gone, Lena turned back to the crowd. "This isn't revenge," she said. "This is repair." There was no applause. Just something deeper. Stillness, then release. A tear rolled down a manager's cheek. An intern clapped once, quietly. Others just stood taller, as if their value had suddenly been restored. And for the first time in the company's history, justice hadn't come from the top down. It had risen from the floor up. The storm had passed. But what remained wasn't ruin, it was renewal. Weeks after the firing, the company felt different. Not in the dramatic overnight way some people hoped for, but in small, unmistakable shifts. The lights stayed on a little later, not because people were overworked, but because they cared. Employees stopped whispering in elevators. They started speaking in meetings. Managers asked questions and waited for real answers. The air felt lighter. And Lena? She didn't move into the corner office. She turned it into a community hub. The walls, once covered in certificates, were now whiteboards filled with staff ideas, anonymous feedback, goals scribbled in multiple handwritings. Every Friday, anyone, no matter their title, could walk in, pitch a project, or share a concern. Some called it unconventional. Lena called it overdue. She walked the halls daily, not to oversee, to connect. She remembered names, stories, birthdays. She passed out handwritten notes to employees who had once been invisible, notes that read things like, "I saw how you stayed to help a teammate last night. That's leadership. Your system improvement saved us 17 hours last month. Thank you. You matter here. Never forget that." She invited the fired engineer back, the one Shaw had punished for being honest. The crowd gave him a standing ovation when he walked into his old department. "Welcome home," Lena said, shaking his hand. She reinstated maternity benefits, mental health coverage, flexible hours for caregivers. She knew some would resist, but most didn't. Because when culture shifts from fear to trust, people rise to meet it. Departments once in competition started collaborating, sales brought ideas to R&D, marketing started asking customer support what clients actually needed, and in between meetings, laughter returned to the hallways. It wasn't perfect, mistakes still happened, deadlines were still missed, but Lena had changed what mattered most, how people saw each other. And more importantly, how they saw themselves. One afternoon, she returned to the janitor's closet, not to reminisce, but to retrieve one final item. Inside, covered in dust, was her old uniform, the one she wore for a decade. She held it up, looked at the faded name tag. Lena. She smiled, not because she missed that life, but because it had given her everything: perspective, patience, power. She folded it neatly and placed it in a glass case by the entrance of the building. A plaque beneath it read, "True leadership begins where recognition ends." People stopped to read it every day. New hires asked about the story. Veterans retold it with pride. And Lena, she never let the power change her. She let it remind her that the floor she used to mop was always beneath the same roof she now led. Because leadership isn't just about making decisions. It's about honoring the journey that taught you how to make them. And Lena, she hadn't just earned the corner office. She had earned every step that led to it. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there needs to be reminded that their worth isn't tied to their title. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or silenced. Your voice matters here. Like the video if you believe real leadership listens. And don't forget to subscribe, because we tell the stories that others ignore, and trust me, you don't want to miss the next one.